Welcome back to Project Command. I'm Captain Peter Eunice, and I'll be your host. Today's guest is Jill Cotton, Executive Vice President at Brycer, nationally recognized keynote speaker, and a leading voice in fire prevention, technology, and community risk reduction. Jill has spent years helping fire departments modernize the way they approach inspections, compliance, prevention strategy, and public safety systems. Through her work with Brycer and inspection reporting technology, she's been at the forefront of helping agencies navigate the growing complexity of data, compliance, resource limitations, and operational efficiency. In this episode, we're going to talk about the future of prevention, how technology is reshaping the fire service, leadership in a rapidly evolving industry, and what it really takes to drive meaningful organizational change inside public safety agencies. Jill, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited and honored to be on your amazing podcast. So
Oh,
looking
thank
forward
you.
to this discussion.
Yeah, you and I have talked a bunch. We met, I think we first met at the that congressional fire conference,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we've kind of talked to each other a bunch. Been at a lot of the same events, so I've been really excited to get you on the podcast. I think you have some amazing ideas. You're working on some super cool stuff, so I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. It was kind of funny. You're really actually you made my night. I think we were sitting at dinner and I think our table was introducing each other and then you looked at me and you're like, "Wait, are you that Jill Cotton?" I was like, "I don't know."
Like, wait, the
I said,
Jill
"Are you that
Cotton?
or are you that?" Because we were again, like friends or whatever on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, having not met each other in person yet. It was just kind of funny. I was like, "Oh yeah, maybe."
Yeah, you're a pretty big deal. Well, Jill, we have so much to talk about today. I'm very excited about this. But before we get into all that, I wonder, can you just introduce yourself a little bit to the audience? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So I love, by the way, that you didn't age me. So it's spent many years. I've actually grown up in the industry. To my fire friends who are in the fire service, I usually say I come from the other side of the fire service.
Hmm.
So my grandfather was a fire captain for the city of Aurora, Illinois, which is the second largest city here in our state. And like so many other, people in the fire service, kind of had a side hustle doing extinguishers. And long story short, he kind of sucked my dad into it. And then my dad partnered with two other fire guys. And for 35 years, our family ran a fire and life safety business right outside Chicago. So we did, anything from the installation, the inspection, testing, and maintenance of systems. So my very first job, besides sweeping floors, literally sweeping floors and doing the bathrooms, was wearing steel toe boots and learning how to fix fire extinguishers in the shop. Right. So I usually tell people if you want to know why sometimes I might swear a little bit too much, I'm a little bit rough around the edges. I mean, that's really the environment that I grew up in. And a lot of our shop guys or a lot of people that worked for us were, current retired firefighters or people in the fire service. So that's where this frustration, if you will, came about with the lack of ability to collaborate effectively and efficiently with all the jurisdictions that we served. We served hundreds of jurisdictions in three different states. And so when technology really started to become prevalent in the fire service, at the time when our family decided to sell the business, it was actually my brother's idea to start our own company. And so that's how originally, right, I'm one of the co-founders and presidents of Inspection Reports Online, or iRoll. And we did that for 15 years before we recently sold to Brycer, our top competitor. And now, right, I'm speaking to you as the executive vice president of Brycer.
Wow. Jill, what an incredible story. And actually, like, I'm eager to hear about Brycer because I know they're doing some really cool things. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And it's feel free to curse on this podcast. We'll you just
It
gotta
may come out. It may come
yeah,
out.
yeah, feel free. No worries. Well, speaking of Brycer, what is Brycer? Can you just tell us a little bit about what kind of work Brycer does and what your role with them is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it took years to kind of really get that elevator pitch, if you will, what people ask you for. But one of the things I really like talking about to keep it really simple is we are about connecting people to information. right? And so what we're known for is called third-party reporting. We
Hmm.
track and drive real-time awareness and compliance of fire and life safety systems. That's the core of what iRoll was. That's the core of what Brycer was. And believe it or not, I always like to tell this story too, because a lot of people don't realize that iRoll was started in Aurora, Illinois, like down the road, but Brycer was actually started in Elgin, Illinois. We're only like 20 miles from each
Hmm.
other, and the backgrounds are almost identical. Brian, our president here, was also in a family-ran fire and life safety business, and then so were me and my brother. So it's kind of funny again how they were doing the same thing just a few doors down.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's where we started this focus on compliance, this focus on having an understanding of what buildings have systems, the types of systems they have, but most importantly, are those systems functioning?
Hmm.
What happens when they're not? Right? We've seen way too many headlines regarding, well, failed sprinkler systems, lack of inspections. And unfortunately, even if you look at some of the most recent large and deadly fires, they've been a combination of both, right? And in today's day and age, when we have the ability, we have the technology, you have the services, which I'm sure we're going to talk about and I want to talk about, to help our code enforcers have an understanding of just that, there should be no reason why we're still seeing these types of headlines.
Hmm.
So that's again what we're known for, and that's what we do. We have other services and solutions which we can get into, but that is the core of who we are.
So where would people have seen Brycer products? Is it something where like I open my Tough book on the engine and I see? Do you guys have like a software application or is it a back end thing? What products are out there? Just because
Yeah, so
I'm
we're
trying to I want
complete.
to
Yeah,
help kind of paint
yeah,
that picture for everybody.
yeah. So we're completely a web-based software as a service is what we are known as. And what's really great, I think if you go back and you think about traditional like hardware, having to download something or having to even get an app, you don't need one with our web-based application
Hmm.
because it's accessible from any device anywhere. And that again, right, you want to talk about access to information very, very quickly. Most of the time, right, where people will implement Brycer will be mainly at the Fire Prevention Bureau level, right? Because we deal with, again, the inspection side of the house. However, what I don't think a lot of people realize until after they start using and all of this data comes in very, very quickly, we actually impact almost every aspect of the fire service from emergency response to operations. I mean, we can talk about false alarms all day long, right? Well, what reduces false alarms? Well, inspection, testing, and maintenance. Do you have an understanding of whether or not your alarms are working? Why aren't they? What really is the deficiency? What really is the reason we're sending our rigs out on a false alarm? So again, even though we start in the prevention kind of house, if you will, that I call it the trickle out effect. It does impact so many other aspects of what's happening from a community perspective. And the other thing I absolutely love, right, is the community risk reduction perspective of this. You want to talk about one of the most impactful ways to collaborate with people who are in and out of your buildings more so than the fire department. It's a force multiplier,
Hmm.
right? So now you are able to collaborate with service contractors or providers who, again, are not only going in and out, but they are also connected to the people, right? They're connected to the business owners, they're connected to the community. And so now you're getting all of this information from multiple people who have that understanding and awareness of what is happening inside of that building. And oftentimes, Peter, what I think is again incredible is it's not just about the system. And it's really funny sometimes. I will go to, train or we'll have discussions with contractors, and I have a question I always ask them, and I'll say, hey, if I'm coming to your town or to your city and I said, where should I not go have lunch? Would you know? And they all start laughing. Has nothing to do with the system. It has everything to do with the fact that they know the condition of walking into that building. And I say, by the way, don't really tell me the name of a, of a restaurant, but again, it comes down to when you walk in buildings, you notice these things. So again, why are we not collaborating with those types of people, right? I say go directly to the source of the information.
Hmm. So let me ask you kind of maybe it's a non sequitur, but why do fire alarms fail? Because the reason I've gone to a million false alarms, maybe 100 million false alarms. Why? So what makes a fire alarm fail?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And I may counter that back to you. When you have gone out to false alarms, what are you finding? And sometimes there's different nuances to that. It's not always the alarm.
Hmm.
And that is where having an understanding, a true understanding of, well, hey, number one, was this alarm actually serviced? And if it was serviced, did we know about it? And if we knew about it and there were deficiencies, what specifically were the deficiencies? That's where it comes down to having an understanding of the system itself. And that's not always the responsibility of the inspector or the code enforcer. Yes, they need to know that there's a system there, but it's not necessarily their role to understand how that system functions. That's the role of the contractor, right? The licensed professional
Hmm.
doing that work, which is why, again, when you have a platform where that information can come in immediately and you have people looking at it who understand that and go, okay, hey, this could potentially cause an issue, or this is causing an issue. We need to do something about it now, right? We're being more proactive about it rather than reactive. And again, there's always, I say that the err on the side of caution, because not every deficiency means that the system is not going to function. But there's definitely, those specific, again, to codes and standards or whatever code a department may be following, where yes, this is a deficiency and this means we must respond to it right now. So again, I think comes down to situational awareness. Like, do we have the awareness of what is actually happening with that alarm? And what, if anything, does our response need to be?
Hmm.
And again, that's where we're going to help answer those and direct that process a lot quicker than you guys constantly responding and not knowing or not even having that awareness about what really is going on inside of that building, and especially with a specific system.
Well, that's so. First of all, thank you for that. That's a really great answer. Let's pass on a little nugget of wisdom about fire alarms. What's something that you would pass along to a fire officer who's going to a lot of false alarms in their district, whether it's trouble alarms or fire alarms? What's something that they should know that might make their life a little bit easier?
Number one, when was the last inspection? How about that? Let's start simple. And I think sometimes we try to make this way too complicated. I think when we just have the understanding that the alarm was serviced, it was recently serviced, by whom it was serviced, and again, what we found during that inspection will automatically help us understand and predict whether or not we're going to have continued issues there. Now, the unfortunate side to that, right, comes also down to enforcement. How well a fire department enforces inspection, testing, and maintenance also will determine
Hmm.
the longevity of compliance, right? Because what happens within a year of having an alarm or a sprinkler or a hood system service? Well, a lot of things can happen in that time, which is why, again, when you bring consistency to a process of understanding what is going on with that alarm, it allows them again to look at these situations and know or predict where they're going to continue to have issues. But the other side of that, Peter, I think too, is just there's always going to be people who just don't do anything until it's, that fee or that fine, until again there's maybe a little bit more heavier of enforcement. Because I think unfortunately we still sometimes have that mentality, either A, it's not going to happen to me, or the fire department hasn't been here. They haven't been to our building, they haven't inspected our building, so we don't need to take care of this issue right now. And again, that's where that risk increases. And unfortunately, there are those fires that happen when I always say we should have known this. We should have
Hmm.
known about, the status of that alarm or that sprinkler or that hood before it even got to this point.
Yeah, that's really good information. I appreciate that. Well, Jill, let's switch gears here because there's something else I wanted to talk to you about. One of the things that I have appreciated when I listen to you talk, and I've seen, several of the different addresses you've given, I've seen some of the stuff you've put out on LinkedIn, and I really appreciate the focus on technology. Obviously, every project in the fire service is a technology project now because
Yeah.
it's all so integrated.
Yeah.
And the big, sort of elephant in the room is AI. And, so I recently did an episode where I was a Q&A, and I was talking about, is AI overhyped? And I think, let me just pitch this to you and see what you think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to admin AI, like using AI in an administrative setting, so like, report generation or document synthesis or data, aggregation, I think it's underhyped. I think that there's a massive amount of potential to use it administratively. I wonder operationally though, I've seen a lot of vendors saying, "Oh, we'll be able to map your calls and we'll be able to, help you put your, on-scene reports together quicker and all this other stuff." And I think that sometimes I think the operational stuff, the technology's not there yet. But I think you're in a unique position to talk about this because you're kind of at that crossroads of community risk reduction and technology. So what have you seen and what are your thoughts about where AI is, what you guys are doing with it? And do you think it's overhyped or do you think that there's some real value there?
I love this question, and we could go down this rabbit hole, for a whole hour. So I'll kind of say just a few things. Is it overhyped? I think in some cases, 1000%. And I'll use a few examples. And this is where you'll hear me talk about, and actually it was for John Mills who I first heard say this is bullshit development or bullshit marketing. So there's my swear for the morning.
Keep
Right.
hey
So
once we say
yeah.
the first curse word, we might as well say a
Yeah,
bunch because
okay. So
you gotta check that little box on Amazon.
yeah,
Yes, cur or
check. I got it.
yes.
I got it.
Feel free. Keep rolling.
And again, this is it actually personally bothers me because I'm seeing technology companies now, well, AI, 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 and you're right. AI is going to help us in so many other aspects, and it already has. You said it from an administrative standpoint. There's some definite things that we can look at from, I've seen some really good examples of being able to take our voices and, pre-populate information and save time and efficiency. I'm understanding that, and I definitely agree with that, and I see where it's working really well. Where it really bothers me is when all of a sudden you're having companies market, well, AI is doing this, AI is doing that. But my thing is then ask how. Ask those vendors, how are you using AI? Why are you using AI? What data is feeding your AI? Because in some aspects of the fire industry, believe it or not, we don't even have standardized data that could say, well, if you're in this scenario or this situation, it stays the same across the board. And I'll use fire and life safety systems. How about codes and standards? Right? Not everybody is on the same code and standard. Not everybody follows that. There's amendments, there's ordinances, there's all this. So, what specifically are we talking about? So you have to be very mindful of when people say that they're using AI and technology. And I would say, and I would encourage people, just have a conversation with your technology vendor about how they're using AI. I think from a development standpoint, again, fantastic. Are we getting better at it? 1000%. Can we take the human out of the loop in this industry? 1000% no. Not when it comes to potential loss of life.
Hmm.
Absolutely not. So again, I think it really depends on a way a fire department is looking to use AI. I think absolutely we should be training, right? Let's start training everyone in the department to understand what really is AI. What could we use it for? What are the potential risks? Do we have data governance? The other area that I'm still not seeing that gap close is the conversation between your internal IT department and your actual department. How do they and what do they feel about AI? How will it affect or impact the fire department specifically? So, and there's some really great, articles and resources and people in our industry who are really helping shape that for fire departments. So I just go back to have conversations. I'm not one to shy away from asking a question I don't know the answer to. I need to understand that in order to help, right? So, is it overhyped? Definitely sometimes. Is it underutilized? 1000%. Are we going to see it continue to change our industry? Yes, we are. I think I recently saw Scott Roseberry or somebody post something about the robotics, and you're seeing it. You're seeing it in Singapore, you're seeing it in other countries. Again, will it 1000% replace? I don't know. Like sometimes I think yes, and sometimes I think absolutely not, because I'm just such a believer in the power of the human. So when you look at AI, I think about it as a tool. It's a tool or a resource that we can use to better ourselves. But again, sometimes it's still only as good as the way we're training it. And that sometimes honestly can be kind of scary, right? And in our industry, again, when you look at some of the ways that we look at data, again, you don't even have agencies sharing that data. So again, it's kind of still this gray area, and we're being mindful. I think that's a really good word. Just be mindful of the way in which that we're going to start using AI or how it's going to impact. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Man, Jill, you said so many great things there. I have like 1,000 things I want to say. One of the things that occurs to me, and this is the reason I'm so interested in project management, the reason I started a podcast and wrote a book about it, is because I think if somebody invented a piece of technology tomorrow that would teleport the fire engine to the fire, immediately put the fire out, and teleport the victims right directly to the burn center at the hospital, it would take us 5 years to start using that, because the limiting factor is our ability to implement it, our ability
Yes.
to, purchase it, RFP it, get it trained, write a policy for it, get it out on the units, teach people how to use the system, come up with a program manager for it, do some risk mitigation for it. So it almost doesn't matter how great the thing is. Our ability as public safety agencies to actually physically execute things, regardless of how great it is a huge limiting factor. I've seen it time and time again. And then the other thing that you said that I absolutely love was about the data that AI is using. I was actually having a conversation with another person I interviewed recently, who's kind of an AI expert, was that when I started using ChatGPT in like late or early 23, maybe late 22, right when it first came out, I feel like the outputs were much better. Like the app itself has gotten better, the interface has gotten
Sure.
better, the
Yeah. Yeah.
functionality has gotten better, but the outputs I feel like in some ways have gotten worse. And I think just like you said, it's a data thing. In the beginning, it was all totally legit, human created data. And now we have AI models that create data that other AI models eat, that they
Yeah.
then create data that another AI model will eat, and they create data. So you have this like very cyclical process where AI creates data, which eats, which just gets eaten by another AI model. And it's not to say that AI can't create good data. It's just, if you went to ChatGPT and you took a picture of an apple and you said, recreate this picture with no changes, it'll recreate it, but there will be a change. And if you did
Absolutely.
that 15 times, you'll be looking at a banana, and so it's interesting that the value of the data is so critical. And the other thing that occurred to me while you were saying this, sorry, I had like literally all
No,
these
I
things
love
popped into
this.
my
Trust me,
head
I love it.
while you were saying, it's like pop, 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 pop. Is when you look at a lot of the fire and life safety data, it is so antiquated. Like we'll pull up a pre-plan and it'll be like from 1998. So even if AI could grab that data and be like, hey, here's everything you need to know. If the data is garbage, it almost doesn't matter, because it's like, well, great, now you've synthesized
Thousand
data
percent.
that isn't at all accurate.
Well, so counter that. I love what you said because this is the reality of the fire industry still. I've heard many leaders say this, and I definitely agree. We don't have a technology problem. There's an abundance of technology
Yeah,
available. We have an adoption problem. We
100%.
can't get the things that we need fast enough. And it's not even just from a tech standpoint. I think it's from also a resource standpoint. And here's again the frustrations that I'm seeing is still, right? I've said this year after year. our responsibilities are growing, the needs of our communities are growing, the challenges, look at, batteries, energy storage systems, all these things are changing, but we're not getting necessarily more people, right? We have the lowest retention rate right now in the fire service than we ever have before. We're also not necessarily getting more capital resources. But there are programs, and this is something probably I should have said in the beginning, that's really, again, impactful from a Bricer perspective. Our programs are cost-free to the fire department. So
Hmm.
even being a cost-free service solution technology that literally can deliver so much data fast, we still see a turnaround in our sales cycle, if you will, sometimes be anywhere from up to 1 to 2 years. Now that's changed a little bit because third party reporting is a proven practice, right? We can prove and we have the data now to prove how quickly we can change communities. But when we first started this, it was like, you're selling miracle water, right? Like, what do you mean? And everyone's, what do you mean it doesn't cost anything? But again, the other challenge, right, is not every IT department understands why technology such as ours, how fast it can change the fire department, and that it's not traditional software. We're not building anything for the fire department. It's already built,
Yeah.
right? They're not having to buy any devices. It's compatible with any device, and so just with Bricer, and even when we had iRoll, that is a hurdle that I think a lot of us are feeling is we have the solutions to help you reduce risk now, but there's still that barrier,
You
right?
know, wow, Joe. I mean, like, I feel like I've said this already 3 times. I'm going to stop saying it because I feel like it's repetitive. Great. I love what you just said. So great. The adoption problem is totally right. And, I think part of it is that, if we're going to be totally honest, most fire departments, even the big ones with big budgets and, good planning sections and all that, can really only do one or two big things at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of times the adoption scares us away because we know how big of an undertaking it is, and effectively executing projects is so hard. And it's the fire service is a unique environment to do project management because it's not like the private sector where in the private sector they measure things like cost per new customer or ROI or whatever. We don't care about that stuff in the fire department. We care about community outcomes and
Community. Yeah.
workforce impact. And the shift schedule makes it difficult, and the turnover in administration makes it difficult. You'll have a planning chief who's there for 2 years, and then he's right back out to the district, and he
Yeah.
starts a project, and then he goes back to the district, and the next person takes 6 months to get their feet underneath them, and then and on and on. So the fire department is a very unique and challenging environment to adopt things, to execute things, to deploy things. And that makes it hard when you have technology like yours
Yeah.
or like whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be technology, it could be equipment, new thermal imaging camera, a new 12 lead monitor, a new whatever. It's hard to execute, it's hard to deploy. Those are challenging projects. I mean, this is my passion actually.
And this is where I think we are so underrated
Hmm.
because here's what's really great and unique about, Bricer. We take on all the heavy lifting. Besides meeting with our partners and going through the data that they give us, or even if they don't have data, we actually have proactive services that will capture that data
Hmm.
for them. We do all the implementation, we do all the training. Our services reduce their having to manage technology. We actually assist in that entire process. So not only is it data delivered, you have people, and I always go back to people first. You have people that can drive your processes, and you're doing that through technology. Again, go back to force multiplier. Not only are you collaborating with the people who are going in and out of your buildings to bring you that information, then it trickles out to your crews, or whether, that's inspections, whether that's on the rig, whether that's going to, an actual emergency, but it also trickles out to the people in your community, that business owner, building owner, whomever's in that building. And as a service, we're not just a software, we provide services that help that stay consistent, that communicate that process. And then, of course, you have the technology itself that has automated processes and procedures. And again, we can be up and running in about 30 to 45 days. So that's another
Hmm.
unique aspect of what we do. It's not this long, drawn out project that they have to have so many people involved in. I mean, yes, there are people still has to be involved and they're the code enforcers and things like that, but a majority of it, our services are what's helping in that process. And it's just fascinating. And I don't think that's highlighted enough, especially from a third party perspective, right? Not to mention some of the other, solutions that we've come up with and how we're helping contractors. We recently released what's called our premise portal, where now we can have the building owner themselves upload documentation and forms such as, tier two, self inspections, alarm registrations. How about just information about what's happening in their building directly to the code enforcer? So again, when you don't have the people to get out and inspect your occupancies every year or every 3 years or whatnot, again, why are we not going directly to those sources? Why are we not implementing technology like this that is actually a lot easier than what we're used to? Again, we come down to sometimes those barriers,
Hmm.
right? Somebody, just understanding, how it actually can happen, or they have the internal barriers, your IT folks, sometimes legal, which always, is something that we have to deal with. But it does sometimes just it blows my mind, and it's frustrating, right? It's frustrating when you literally jump on the internet or you open something up and there's a headline that a senior living facility fatalities because the sprinkler system wasn't functioning. And what's the first question we ask when that happens? Were inspections done? Was the system functioning?
Hmm.
When was the last time somebody was in that building? Those are like the first three questions we always ask when you see large fires, in commercial buildings. And so we literally can help answer those questions immediately.
Yeah. Whew, man, that's good stuff. Let me switch gears here because you brought up something that reminded me of something that I've been really eager to ask you, which is I think people that are listening to this will think, okay, you started your own company, you're now a senior vice president at a large nationwide company. What are you have to be very efficient to be able to do the things that you've done. What are some of your personal secrets to efficiency? What would you attribute your success to? What are some little tidbits you can give us?
Well, thank you for asking. Honestly, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. Number one,
Okay,
a
well,
lot of
it's
a lot of practice.
a project command exclusive. We'll
I
hear it
know,
here. We'll get it
yeah.
here first.
Yeah, no, I love it. And something again, I did kind of reminisce, right, about the old days, right, when we first started doing this. A lot of it was, nobody taught me these things, right? Even though my father and his partners have been in business for 35 years, believe it or not, when we started IRL, I tell people IRL and Brycer were not born in a boardroom. We
Hmm.
literally, like, I feel like we were started in our garages, right? We created these companies and these solutions based out of our frustrations, and there wasn't really a roadmap to that because the technology was so new. But yet, even like from my dad perspective, he back then he was big on like make lists, like prioritize your day or prioritize. So I write, believe it or not, I mean, I have notebooks
Hmm.
everywhere. Remember, I take notes all the time and then I prioritize those notes. I'm a still big writer because, well, number one, that's part of also my background is writing in journalism. But again, when I can put it on paper and I can see it, then I understand where I need to prioritize it. And I know it sounds kind of old school, but maybe I am a little bit old school in that respect. Of course, again, I also, have an understanding of what really does need to be prioritized at this point. I'm a very good listener, so I'm listening to the teams and the people around me and prioritizing some of the things that I need to do to help the team around me, right? Our people that are here. Obviously, tools like AI. If you don't think I'm using tools like AI, I absolutely am.
Hmm.
Has it absolutely impacted some administrative things on the background? Yes, it absolutely has. And I encourage people to do that and to take the time to learn how to do that. But I also, again, prioritize things like my mental health,
Hmm.
my physical health. There are things that I will not compromise, especially because I travel a lot, right? And so, meditating for me is important. Reading is important. My workouts are important. Everybody knows I love a good dessert and I love food. But for the most part, like my overall healthy diet of what I eat is healthy. And those things, believe it or not, and sleep. I prioritize sleep. It's something I think we need to talk about in the fire service way more. It does help me be more efficient and effective throughout the day.
Hmm.
Right? If I'm lacking any of those things, I think we joked about ADD earlier, then I can't be efficient in what I'm trying to do. We went from a company of, 25 to 30 to, we're here over 100. And so I have to be on top of my game and I have to understand where those priorities are and then use my internal processes to be efficient in all those different areas. So again, it's kind of a combination of old school meets new school
Hmm.
and just staying on top of that. And trust me, do I have those days where I feel behind, I feel stuck? You are frustrated. Of course, I'm human, right? I definitely have those days where I feel like I'm not doing enough, right? Am I doing enough? And then I just have to remind myself and give myself some grace, right? That I am one person. I can only do so many things. And again, this is where also I rely on people, right? I do not hesitate to ask people for help. I do not hesitate to bring in people for projects, right? When it needs to be. Like, I can't do all of these things successfully, right? And if I know that, then I need to surround myself by the people who I know are going to help me be successful. And I think that's another part of being efficient is being okay with asking for help and being okay with delegating things to people you trust.
Nice. Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, you mentioned books. What are some of your favorite books, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh man. I think it just kind of depends. I'm all over the place. There's times I'll read just because I don't want to think, about
Hmm.
it. So I'm into a lot of like murder mystery, like government things. So it's kind of that aspect. I read a lot of, journalistic articles, the magazines, what's coming out. Again, things on AI, things just on the fire and life safety in general. I'm a huge supporter of, going to those who know what they're talking about, like the experts in those industries and just reading what they're putting out. So a lot of like articles
Hmm.
more than actual books. But then from a book perspective too, I'm always trying to enhance myself. So I read things again on how to make like your brain healthier, how and why is sleep important. A lot of podcasts. I do a lot of different types of podcasts, whether that's in industry or out, just to gain little nuggets. Like,
Hmm.
again, if somebody's doing something really well, why am I not going to go listen to what they're
Totally.
doing? Try to apply that to myself. One of my favorites is a Diary of a CEO.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's a good
oh,
one.
it's a great one. And one of the things I love about Steve is that he doesn't just focus on one industry. He's all over the place. So you can find something that, is really interest to you or for you, and then listen to it and apply what needs to be applied where it needs to be applied. So again, I'm kind of all over the place in that aspect. I try to be open to new things that people suggest. I recently started or just picked up the five types of wealth.
Hmm.
That was a suggestion by our director of operations here. He's a former military guy. And he also reads a lot of leadership books. And so I was like, oh, great, I'll start it. And I started listening to it and realized very quickly, nope, this is one that I actually
Yeah.
need to get like the hard so I
Hmm.
can make notes while I'm reading it
Yeah.
myself. So I just got it in the mail.
I'm a big Audible fan.
Yes.
I listen. I feel like I think I might be a slow reader because every time I try to listen or every time I try to read, I always have to read the same pages over and over again. But when I listen to it on Audible, man, I'll just chew through some books.
I love that. So here's my Audible,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. What you got?
So Where am I at right now? Let's see. I have Strong Ground by Brene Brown. So if you know Brene,
My
she's very
my
big on.
my wife loves Brene
Oh,
Brown.
good. Yeah, leadership. She's really big on leadership, right? And I just think she's hilarious. So, good old Texas girl.
Hmm.
The Five Types of Wealth, like I said, but I had to stop. Another one I'm listening to is Southern Man by Greg Iles. So,
Okay.
again, just Steve Barry is another one of my favorite authors. So, Steve Barry only releases a book like every so often because he actually goes and studies in the areas that he's going to be writing about. So, part of his books are true historical events
Hmm.
and the other is completely fiction, and you never know until the very end he tells you, and it's fascinating.
Wow.
So
I would
again,
love
it just
that.
kind of depends, and then I have stuff on here like Read Your Mind by Oz Perlman, so I'm kind of all over the place of.
Have you read Switch by Chip and Dan Heath?
No.
Oh man, you should Jill, you
Okay.
would you would really like that book. It's all about how to change things, like whether it's personally at a company. It's basically like a very simple model for change management. I
Okay. Love
love
it.
that book.
Love it.
I've recommended it to a lot of people. It's on my top 10 favorite list. It's written by two brothers. I think you would really like that book.
I will happily get it and listen
Yeah, and
to it.
for anyone out there who's listening and is looking for a good book, pick it up. Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. Not a paid endorsement, just a genuine
Not a paid
a genuine
I
favorite of
wish.
mine. Yeah, that's right. I wish Chip, Dan, if
Um,
you're listening, I will do a paid endorsement for that book. Yeah, I think you'd like that one.
I think one day that's on my bucket list is to write a book. So.
Yeah. Nice. So you've got a lot to talk about. Well, on a similar note, you do a lot of public speaking. I've seen several of the different things you have done. In fact, I think I caught the tail end of the one in DC. But, a lot of people, that's their biggest nightmare is public speaking.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I don't know if you still get nervous when you speak or what, but what are some of the secrets that you found to standing in front of a room full of people, especially, by the way, especially firefighters who can be a tough crowd. That's a tough crowd. So tell us about that. How do you do it?
Yeah, I just released an article for the Women in Fire series, on the Fire Safety Journal.
Hmm.
And part of that was starting, walking as the only woman in a room full of professionals, and their arms are crossed and they're giving you that look like, what does she know? And so that's when I out hustle, out learn, and keep going. But my previous business partner, one of my business partners, Dave Pruden, used to say when we first started at iRoll, we would be going out and we'd have to be in hotel rooms. And he learned very quickly not to get a room next to mine because he could hear me all night long practicing
Hmm.
presentation. And I wasn't practicing it to say word for word. It was more that I care so deeply about the message that I was trying to get across, and you don't want to forget certain things, right? So I truly would stay up, and practice and practice. Now, in the beginning of doing this, and I've always been a talker, surprise, right? Outgoing. I may have had a too social on a few of my report cards, growing up or whatnot, and standing on my soapbox and saying what I need to say. But you're right. When it comes to public speaking, it is more feared than death. It is more feared than death. I want you to think about that for a minute. But it has definitely taken practice, and then you have to build confidence. It's also taken a shit ton of failure. I mean, let's just talk about that, right? I mean, there's no doubt I have failed in getting up and saying what I wanted to say and
Hmm.
the nerves taking over. Absolutely. I've had to, practice tricks of instead of saying I'm nervous, I say I'm excited. And believe it or
Hmm.
not, I actually am excited to speak. And your body doesn't know the difference, right? So the more I would tell myself that I'm excited, the less my nerves, would carry through. I also have my little rituals that I do of at least moving my body, and believe it or not, I will walk around my town and I will talk out loud. I will say the things that I think are important, and so people actually have like, "Were you like on the phone?" I'm like, "No, I'm talking to myself." Right? This is how I practice things. But I come from it too, from a true passion. Education, my master's is in education. So I think at some point I get to use, that passion of wanting to make a difference, wanting to impact someone with a message, that I have, or whether I'm presenting by myself, whether I have a co-presenter. I just was recently doing a class on, data doesn't change outcomes, people do,
Hmm.
with Rice from Peoria, Illinois. And again, we just feed off of each other. And it's not that I go and I write down my whole script and I memorize it. I just put words down so I kind of know the flow and what I want to say. But it has been a lot of practice and a lot of failures to get to that ability where, now it's definitely a lot more confidence comes into play than the nerves or the second guessing. And to be honest, again, I truly, if I royally screw up, then I do. And some
Hmm.
at some point too, like nobody really knows if I screw up more so than me. But even if the audience does know, oh, she, missaid a word. Actually, I recently did this at FDIC. They made fun of me. I think I said adaption instead of adoption. And I knew immediately because Mike Cox and Dr. Lori Moore Merrill, a few of them were laughing. I'm like, oh, I totally screwed up. And at that point, I'll just kind of make fun of myself.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what are you supposed to do in that, situation? But it really has become something that I value. I want to always become better at it. So I also still, I watch public speakers. I have obviously a few in industry who I look at and they're just so incredible and they're so natural with it. And I aspire, to speak and to train like they do. But I'm also very much, I always don't just like me. I'm very engaging. I like to include the people that I'm,
Hmm.
and sometimes that you just can't do that. But for the most part, when I do speak or train, I try to get that communication, right? That discussion because it is more authentic. And I think that's a really big part too of what I try to do is just be authentic in my approach. I'm not trying to be, like another person. I want to take what they're doing well and make it my own. And that's really then where I get more confidence in what I'm trying to say and what I want to, the message that I want to get across.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good advice. I like that telling yourself that you're excited, not nervous. I think that,
Yeah.
I think self-talk is really important. This is something that, I mean, I talk to my daughters about this all the time. And like, hey, just be careful about what you say to yourself, because your brain will internalize it.
You know, I, it took me a long time to understand that. And I think the sooner we can start to tell our kids, especially girls, that,
Yeah.
um, eventually they'll start to understand that. And if you look at, well, professional athletes, number one, what do you see them doing on the sideline before they compete? They're breathing, they're self-talk, self-talking to themselves. They're doing these things that are proven. These are proven practices that help people in whatever situation that they're going into. Think about it from an emergency standpoint.
Mm.
When you go into an emergency standpoint, you don't always have that ability to take that moment, but there are tricks you could do while you're driving there, right? Breath work, actually visualization is proven, and when you make these things consistent, it does make a difference in your personal outcome. And I cannot speak highly enough of those little things that have helped me throughout the years really change and be more prepared for how I speak. And again, especially when you're in front of, hundreds, if not thousands of people. It's different behind the camera, but when you're standing in front, I mean, that pressure is definitely real.
Yeah.
You have to
No,
handle.
no question about that. And then, I think, to something you said about when you make a mistake, I don't think people expect or even really value perfection. I think they like realness, realism, whatever the word is. So, they see you and you mess up a word. It's like, well, I know she knows the word adoption. It's not
Yeah.
like she doesn't know the word.
Yeah.
She's, up here talking in
Ah,
front of a giant room and she's got a
yeah.
lot to say. And it's like, yeah, whatever. She said the wrong word.
But,
I think, it almost makes you more real. I used to, when I started doing podcasts, I used to, if I would do that, if I would say a word wrong, I'd try to go back and like edit. And it's like,
edit.
but no,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to pretend I'm a robot or that I'm perfect or that I'm AI or whatever. It's like, no, I'm a human. When I
Definitely
talk,
not AI
yeah, when I
here.
talk, sometimes I make a mistake. Sometimes I say
Yeah.
the wrong thing. Sometimes I, say something dumb. Whatever. I'm a human. So
Yep.
that's how it
Exactly.
is.
Exactly. Right. And I do think we don't talk enough about failure, and
Yeah, you're right
I always
about
say
that.
I'm perfectly imperfect, right? And that idea of perfection is just so unrealistic. And I look at the journey to get to where I'm sitting, today. You have to fail as a company at, with the things that you try to do. You're going to drop the ball, but it's in how you pick yourself back up. It's in being able to tell a customer of yours, hey, I think I screwed up, but let me show you how I learned from it, and let me, attempt to, take care of this. It's in those moments that people do stay. I mean, we still have our very first customer from 2012 still with us.
Hmm.
So, when Iroll and Brycer joined forces, it was a really big deal. We have been contentious competitors since day one. But I do want to let people know, and I am very transparent and I am humble and I have no problem showing vulnerability. I talk a lot about, again, like, you don't think we had some hard conversations about our failures and our successes when making this decisions. You don't think I looked at other options and how emotional that was. And I think I have to be very understanding and accepting of those things, the highs, the lows, the goods, the bads, the ups, downs, whatever you want to call it, in order to be successful and in order to grow as an individual and as a company, right? And so I think sometimes talking about failures and what you're not always doing well is the way you actually grow the most. So it's
Yeah,
been
and it's the best. I think it's the what? How do I want to say this? Sometimes you have the sort of social media effect where we only put our successes on social media, and so it creates this like perception, like, oh no, my life is nothing but one success, one's moving from strength to strength, and I
no.
and I think talking about the failures, people appreciate it because it's real and they can empathize with it. They're like, oh yeah, I'm failing right now too. I really appreciate seeing that somebody like Jill, who's an obviously impressive person, is like, oh, she failed too. Like, oh, okay, then I feel better that I'm failing right now. Like, this isn't the end of me. This is a
Daily.
failure.
There's a daily failure. I mean, yeah. And I love, again, I'm gonna go back to, you say you tell your kids that. I tell my kids that as well. My son just graduated from college. My daughter's about to be a senior in high school, and that is something that they have witnessed.
Hmm.
They have seen the late nights. They have seen the tears. And again, this is where a lot of people don't realize the entrepreneurship behind, some of the things that we do, right? This, again, wasn't handed to us, it's been built. And so when you make a mistake or when you're so worried about something, seeing the adult in your life or the mom or the dad or whatever go through those emotions, at first I like thought, oh my gosh, I should have hid those from my kids. And now I'm going, no, I'm so glad that they saw this. I'm so glad that they saw me in moments of weakness. But not only that, how the next day or maybe a week later, it was a totally different mom or a totally different Jill or president or executive vice president because of that moment,
Yeah.
right? So I do talk to my kids about, listen, your job as a kid, as a young teenager or, college kid, is to fail and fail majorly. But when you do, right, when you make that mistake or when you learn from it and move on, don't let that hold you where you are right now, because guess what? You're going to fail the rest of your life.
Yep.
Rest of your life.
I love that.
That's cool. I'm cool
Yeah,
with that
that's
now.
powerful. I really love that. Well, Jill, I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time to come talk to us here. The last question I have for you is, if people want to hear more from you, or they want to get in contact with you, or they want to talk to you and ask you questions, where can people get a hold of you? Where can people find more of your work?
So, I mean, really anywhere. How about this, folks? Pick up the phone,
Hmm.
right? I still tell people all the time, I have a saying. This saying is so true. I can't help if I don't know, right? And so, whether you are a customer, a partner, somebody in industry, I actually recently just helped a college kid finish his senior project. Actually, he just wanted to talk to somebody in industry, and all he had to do is ask, and my answer to that was 100% yeah. So you can either pick up the phone, send me an email, message me on social media. I think Peter, I think most people know me as I'm just a people person.
Hmm.
I genuinely love connecting, whether you want to have a hard discussion, whether you want to pick my brain. Maybe I'm going to reach out to you because I want to pick your brain. I think always having a conversation is so important, and don't be afraid to do that. I used to be, a little bit intimidated by some of those, higher ups, those chiefs or your, other people. Now I go, hey, how am I supposed to, again, change if I don't ask them the
Hmm.
question? So now I'll just ask because you don't, I mean, the worst people can say is no, but I say availability and accessibility is so important. And I really do try to make myself available to people who want to have these conversations, whether it's about Bryce or whether it's about my journey or whether it's just to shoot the shit. I mean, let's have a conversation. So
Yeah, and I will say that you are truly the same whether you're on a podcast, giving a lecture, sitting at a conference dinner table. My experience with you is that what you see is what you get. There's no hidden or ulterior motives there. So I think that speaks really highly of your character.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Joe Cotton, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. That was a blast. We could have kept going.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
We'll do it again.
absolutely.